The unexpected signal. The quiet hum of the scanning station filled the room as the crew of the Outpost Alpha watched the screens. Located on the edge of the known galaxy, this remote outpost was tasked with monitoring the vast emptiness of space. It had been weeks since anything of importance had crossed their radar, and most of the crew had grown tired of the monotony. The long shifts and silence made each day drag on like the last. But today, something changed. The sensor alarms blared suddenly, cutting through the dull quiet. The crew jumped from their stations, startled by the unexpected sound. On the main screen, a strange, blinking signal appeared, one that wasn't supposed to be there. A faint but unmistakable trace of energy, unlike anything the station had ever encountered before, pulsed on the screen. "Captain," cried Lieutenant Samuels, her voice sharp with urgency. "We're getting a signal. It's coming from deep space, way beyond our usual range." Captain Pierce, a seasoned officer with years of experience in the harshest parts of the galaxy, moved quickly to the console. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he ran diagnostics on the signal. It was weak, fragmented, and coming from a point beyond their typical scanning radius. "Any other ships in the area?" he asked, his voice steady despite the growing tension in the room. "None," Lieutenant Samuels replied. "Not for hundreds of light years in any direction. This signal, it's coming from deep within the Empire's territory." The Empire, a name that struck fear into the hearts of everyone who knew of it. A ruthless, aggressive force that ruled half of the galaxy with an iron fist. The Outpost Alpha crew had heard rumors about them, stories of their unstoppable fleet and their endless conquest. But here, on the fringes of known space, no one had expected to make contact with them. They were far from the heart of the Empire's power. "Captain, what should we do?" asked Ensign Harris, a younger officer, his voice tinged with concern. This could be a trap. Captain Pierce didn't answer immediately. He studied the screen, the strange signal flickering in the deep blackness of space. His mind raced. A part of him wanted to dismiss it. Just another glitch, another false alarm. But something about it felt different. The signal wasn't random, and it wasn't from any known enemy ship. It seemed deliberate, purposeful. "We need to find out what this is," Captain Pierce said finally, his voice calm but firm. "Set course for the source of the signal. Full speed ahead." The crew nodded, quickly jumping into action. They had little information to go on, just the faint trace of an unknown signal, a signal that could mean danger or opportunity. But one thing was certain. This was the most significant thing they'd encountered in months. As the ship moved deeper into the dark void of space, the crew felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. The ship's engines hummed steadily as the vast expanse of stars stretched out before them. The silence of space seemed to close in around them as they traveled further into the Empire's domain. Hours passed without incident. The only sound was the occasional tapping of fingers on consoles, the crew's nerves growing tighter with every minute. Captain Pierce stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the screen. His thoughts were racing. If this signal was a trap, they could be walking straight into the heart of the Empire's territory. But if it wasn't, what did that mean? Was this a sign that the Empire was finally stretching its reach further, or was there something more to this signal than met the eye? "Captain, we're almost there," Lieutenant Samuels reported. "The signal is getting stronger." "Good. Prepare for full analysis once we make contact," Pierce replied, his voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside him. "We can't afford to miss any detail." The crew worked in synchronized silence as the ship drew closer to the source of the signal. The tension in the air was palpable. Everyone on board knew that this could be the beginning of something big, whether that something was a peaceful discovery or a deadly encounter. Then, without warning, the ship shuddered. A burst of static rang through the communication channels, followed by an eerie silence. "Captain, we've lost all communication," Ensign Harris shouted. "Keep scanning. Where is it coming from?" Pierce barked. The signal grew stronger, but it was coming from a different direction now, almost as if the source had shifted. The crew's eyes widened as the readings on the console began to change rapidly. The signal was no longer just a faint trace. It was becoming clearer, more defined. And what they saw next would change everything. Before their eyes, a massive shape emerged from the darkness. It was a ship, unlike anything they had seen before. Its sleek, metallic surface reflected the distant stars as it moved slowly across the void, seemingly unaware of their presence. But there was something more. The ship wasn't alone. Behind it, several smaller vessels appeared, their lights blinking erratically as they moved in formation. It was clear now. This was not just a lone ship. It was a fleet. A human fleet. Captain Pierce stared at the screen, his heart racing. This can't be right, he whispered under his breath. How did they get this far into enemy space? The crew was in shock. They had never imagined that humanity's forces could reach this far into the galaxy, especially not the Empire's domain. And yet, here it was, this human warship, now just a few clicks away. Prepare for combat, Captain Pierce ordered, his voice low but resolute. It's time to find out who's behind this, and why they're here. The mystery of this signal had just begun, and what they would discover next could be the key to something far larger than anyone had ever anticipated. Preparing for battle. The hum of the engines was louder now, vibrating through the hull of the ship. As the crew of Outpost Alpha stared at the massive human fleet on the screens, a deep sense of unease settled over them. The ship, an imposing warship at the center of the formation, was unlike anything they had seen before. Its surface gleamed with an advanced, almost alien-like technology, far beyond anything the crew had imagined humanity might possess. Captain, this isn't a standard human ship, Lieutenant Samuels muttered, eyes wide as she analyzed the data. The technology, the design, it's advanced, more than anything we've encountered in the last century. How could they have built this without us knowing? Pierce didn't answer immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the screen, his mind racing. There were too many unknowns. Why had this ship come so deep into enemy territory? Was it an act of desperation, or was it a calculated move? And more importantly, why now? Get in touch with command, Pierce said, his voice steady but firm. Tell them we found the fleet. Tell them everything. Samuels immediately tapped away at her console, sending a message to the higher-ups. Meanwhile, Captain Pierce stood silently at the helm. The ship was moving at a steady pace toward the unknown fleet, and time was running out. This is the most important moment we've faced in a long time, Pierce said, speaking to the entire crew. We don't know what these ships are capable of. We don't know if they're hostile or just here on some sort of mission. But one thing is clear, our enemies will respond soon, and they won't be happy that we found them. The crew worked quickly, preparing for a possible conflict. Shields were brought online, weapon systems were checked, and the crew prepared to take defensive positions. Everyone was on edge, understanding that this could be a turning point in the war. The Outpost Alpha ship had never been prepared to face something like this. Captain, we're receiving a message, Lieutenant Samuels called out. She looked up, her expression grave. It's from the fleet. They're requesting a communication. A strange mixture of emotions ran through the crew. On one hand, the message was a welcome sign of diplomacy. On the other, the fact that the fleet was willing to communicate was unsettling. It meant they knew about the Outpost Alpha ship and were prepared to engage. Put it through, Pierce ordered, stepping forward. The screen flickered, and a calm, yet powerful voice came through the speakers. This is Captain Ilara of the human warship Vanguard. You have discovered us. Do not be alarmed. We are not here to engage in combat unless provoked. We seek to talk, not fight. The crew was stunned. A human captain. The last thing they expected was to hear such words. The Empire's reputation for brutal conquest had shaped their thinking, and the idea that these ships might not be here for war was difficult to accept. I repeat, Captain Ilara's voice came again, this time with more force. We seek a peaceful resolution. We are not your enemies, but we are also not to be underestimated. Our mission is critical. Do not make us enemies. Pierce's mind raced. A part of him wanted to be cautious, to prepare for an ambush. But another part, the part that had always believed humanity could rise to face any challenge, saw a possibility for something more. Could this be a chance to form an alliance? Could they join forces against the Empire? Understood. Captain Pierce finally responded, his voice steady, but with a hint of uncertainty. We will remain cautious, but we will also listen. We will not attack first, but make no mistake, we are ready for whatever comes next. As soon as the communication ended, the tension on the bridge grew even thicker. No one knew what to expect next. The human warship Vanguard was unlike anything they had seen, and their mission remained a mystery. If these ships were peaceful, they could be a valuable ally in the fight against the Empire. But if they were lying, if they had hidden motives, the crew of Outpost Alpha would have to be ready for the worst. Alert all departments, Pierce commanded. Prepare for every scenario. We're on the edge of something big, and we need to be ready for whatever comes our way. The crew worked without hesitation, checking and double-checking everything. The threat of battle loomed large, but something else lingered in the air. Hope. Hope that perhaps humanity's resolve had found a way to survive, even in the darkest corners of the galaxy. But that hope was fragile, and Pierce knew it. Captain, Lieutenant Samuel said, glancing up from her console. We've received word from command. They're sending reinforcements. But it'll take time. We'll need to hold the line until then. Understood, Pierce replied, his voice determined. We'll hold, no matter what. No one gets past us. The crew braced themselves. Whatever this fleet was, whether it was an ally or an enemy, they would face it head-on. They would not back down. Not now. As the human fleet moved closer, Captain Pierce took one last look at the vast emptiness of space, the endless stars scattered across the sky. This was no longer just a mission of survival. It was a turning point. The future of humanity and the galaxy hung in the balance. The enemy reacts. The hum of tension on Outpost Alpha's bridge had reached a new peak. The crew stared at the screens, their eyes fixed on the approaching human fleet. The Vanguard, the flagship of the fleet, led the charge, flanked by smaller ships that moved with a deadly precision. Despite Captain Pierce's cautious optimism, everyone knew the situation was far from settled. The Empire would not allow any human fleet to operate this deep within its territory without a fight. Captain, we're picking up enemy fleet signatures, Lieutenant Samuels announced, her voice filled with urgency. Several ships approaching fast from the Empire's space. They've detected us. How many? Pierce asked, his heart sinking as the realization hit that things were about to get much more complicated. At least 5 large warships, heading straight for us, she replied. And more on the way. The crew fell into an eerie silence as the numbers filled the screen. The Empire's fleet was vast, powerful, and merciless. Even with the surprise of the human fleet's appearance, there was little doubt that the Empire would not hesitate to strike first. The ships were far from friendly, and their reputation for ruthless warfare made it clear that they would not tolerate any intrusion on their territory, no matter who the intruder was. Can we outrun them? Ensign Harris asked, his voice cracking slightly with fear. Not with our current speed, Pierce answered. We'll need to stand our ground. Prepare for battle. The ship's systems began to hum as weapons were armed and shields activated. The crew moved in synchronized action, each officer knowing their role without needing to be told. Tension hung thick in the air. They were about to face a force they couldn't hope to outrun, and with the mysterious human fleet still untested, there was no telling how things would unfold. Captain, I'm receiving a message from the Vanguard, Lieutenant Samuel said, her voice steady, but betraying a hint of uncertainty. It's a direct communication, encrypted. Put it through, Pierce ordered. The screen flickered, and Captain Ilara's calm face appeared once again. She was in her command chair, her eyes sharp, calculating. "Captain Pierce," she said, her voice as composed as ever. "The Empire has detected us. They are on their way. I trust your fleet is prepared for the upcoming engagement." "We are ready," Pierce replied, trying to keep his tone confident despite the doubt swirling inside him. "But we don't know what we're up against. The Empire is ruthless. They won't hesitate to destroy us." Ilara's expression softened slightly, but her eyes remained unwavering. "Then we fight together," she said simply. "We'll hold our ground until reinforcements arrive. But you must trust us, Captain. The Vanguard has been in this kind of conflict before. Together, we can stand against the Empire." Pierce looked around the bridge at his crew. Their faces were a mix of fear and determination. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for their future. If they failed, it wouldn't just be the end of them. It could be the end of humanity's hopes for independence in this corner of the galaxy. "All right," Pierce said after a long pause. "Let's do this. We fight together." The communication ended, and the crew quickly turned their attention back to the enemy. The incoming Empire ships were now clearly visible on the sensors. Huge warships, black and foreboding, each one bristling with weaponry. The enemy had no intention of negotiating. Their mission was simple: destroy the human fleet, no matter what the cost. "Enemy ships are within range," Samuels reported, her hands moving rapidly over her console. "They're preparing to fire." "Brace for impact," Pierce ordered, his voice calm but filled with an underlying urgency. The ship shuddered as a volley of enemy fire streaked toward them. The shields flickered but held, absorbing the impact. Outpost Alpha rocked with the force of the blast, and the crew gripped their consoles to steady themselves. "Return fire," Pierce barked. The Vanguard immediately opened fire, its cannons blazing with powerful bursts of energy that struck the lead Empire ship. The enemy ship flinched under the assault, but it didn't go down. The battle had begun, and the fate of the human fleet now rested in their hands. The Outpost Alpha fired its own weapons, smaller than the Empire's, but no less determined. The crew gave it their all, their every action driven by a singular purpose: survival. The vast void of space around them was filled with the sounds of laser fire, explosions, and the unrelenting force of war. "Captain," Ensign Harris shouted, his voice full of panic, "the Empire ships are closing in on us. We need more firepower." Pierce knew they couldn't hold out forever, but the human fleet was holding its own. The Vanguard had proven to be a formidable opponent, and its advanced technology was making a difference. Still, the numbers were against them. "Keep firing," Pierce ordered, his eyes locked on the screens. "We can't let them break through." The battle raged on. The Empire ships were relentless, but the human fleet was proving to be a challenge. The Vanguard was taking a heavy toll on the enemy, its weapons' precision targeting the weak points in the Empire's ships. But it wasn't enough. The Empire was adapting quickly, shifting strategies to counter the human tactics. As the battle wore on, Captain Pierce's mind raced. Could they really hold their ground? Would reinforcements arrive in time to make a difference? And most troubling of all, could the human fleet, so far from home, really survive against an empire so vast and cruel? As the battle unfolded, the crew of Outpost Alpha could only wait and fight, hoping that their combined strength and determination would be enough to turn the tide. But with every moment that passed, the enemy fleet grew closer, and the stakes grew higher. The war had begun, and there was no turning back. Secrets of the warship. The battle raged on, with every passing minute feeling like an eternity. The roar of explosions and the crackling energy from the weapons filled the bridge of Outpost Alpha as the crew fought valiantly to hold off the relentless onslaught of Empire warships. But amidst the chaos, something began to nag at Captain Pierce. Despite the ferocity of the battle, there was something strange about the Vanguard's behavior. It was almost too perfect, a flawless execution of maneuvers, as if the human fleet had more experience in large-scale combat than they had any right to. "Captain," Lieutenant Samuels called, her voice filled with confusion. "I've been scanning the Vanguard for the past few minutes, and something's off. Their weapons are more advanced than we thought. They're firing on all cylinders, but there's something hidden on board. I can't get a clear read, but it's definitely there." "What do you mean, something hidden?" Pierce asked, turning to face her, his brow furrowing with concern. "I'm not sure," Samuels replied, her fingers flying over the controls. "It's like there's another layer to their technology, something deep within the ship. I can't pinpoint it yet, but I'll keep looking." "Keep on it," Pierce ordered, his mind racing. If there was something hidden on the Vanguard, something more than just advanced weaponry, it could change everything. But for now, the battle still loomed large. "Let me know as soon as you find anything." Despite the ongoing firefight, Pierce's thoughts kept returning to that strange sense of unease. There was something about the human warship that didn't add up. Why had they shown up here, deep in the heart of enemy space? And what was the true purpose of the fleet? Meanwhile, on the Vanguard, Captain Ilara stood in the heart of the ship, overseeing the battle. She could feel the vibrations of the weapons as they tore into the Empire's ships, but her eyes were focused elsewhere. The battle wasn't what concerned her, it was the mission. She had been waiting for this moment for years. Now, with the enemy in front of them, it was time to uncover what had been hidden for so long. "Captain, we're picking up a signal from the engine room," one of the officers reported. It's coming from the hidden storage bay." Ilara's face darkened. "What kind of signal?" "It's faint, encrypted, but it's from the secondary propulsion systems," the officer continued. "It shouldn't be active. We thought it was a backup system, but this is different. Activate the emergency override," Ilara commanded, her voice low and urgent. "Get me a clear signal." A few tense moments passed before the officer responded. "Captain, we've isolated the signal. It's coming from the secret compartment, Section 44. We have a weapon on board, a weapon that was supposed to be sealed off years ago." Ilara's heart skipped a beat. The Vanguard's primary mission wasn't just to engage in battle. It had a far greater purpose. The ancient weapon hidden deep inside the warship was humanity's last hope. A weapon designed to turn the tide of the war, capable of destroying entire fleets, breaking through the strongest of shields, and obliterating any enemy in its path. It had been lost to history, a relic of an older time. Ilara stood up and moved quickly toward the command center's rear. Her steps were purposeful, each one calculated. She had been entrusted with the most dangerous and powerful secret in humanity's arsenal, and now it was time to use it. The Empire had no idea what they were facing. Back on Outpost Alpha, the crew had begun to notice an unsettling shift in the battle. The Vanguard's firepower had increased. Their precision strikes were devastating, and the Empire ships were being torn apart at an alarming rate. It was as if the Vanguard had somehow gained a new level of power. Their weapons were hitting with much more force than before, and the Empire's ships were starting to retreat. "What the hell just happened?" Ensign Harris asked, watching as the massive Empire warship before them broke apart, its shields shattering like glass. "I don't know," Captain Pierce muttered, his eyes glued to the screen. "But whatever it is, it's working. Keep pushing forward." The battle seemed to turn in their favor, the Empire fleet breaking apart as the Vanguard led the charge. The humans had turned the tide of the fight. But Pierce couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something more was going on. The Vanguard had revealed a hidden power, a power that none of them had anticipated. Samuel suddenly spoke up, her voice filled with awe. "Captain, I've managed to break through the encryption. It's true. There's a massive weapon on board. I've been able to access some of the data. The weapon is ancient. It's not just a standard warhead. It's a fully functioning planetary destroyer. If it's activated, the blast radius could wipe out an entire fleet in one shot." Pierce stared at her, his mind reeling. A planetary destroyer. This was far beyond anything they had imagined. "Can we stop it from firing?" Pierce asked, his voice tight with worry. Samuels hesitated, glancing back at the screen. "I don't know. The system is sealed and encrypted, but it seems like it's being prepared for activation. We need to make sure the Empire doesn't get their hands on it first. We can't afford to let that happen," Pierce said firmly. "We need to find out everything about that weapon before we're faced with a choice we can't undo." Just as Pierce spoke those words, a new set of alarms went off. It wasn't from the Empire. It was a distress signal. A message came through from the Vanguard. "Captain Pierce," Ilara's voice echoed over the comms. "I need your help. The weapon is almost ready, but it's not just for destruction. It can be used to reshape the galaxy. You need to understand, this is humanity's true power. The future of the galaxy rests in our hands." The message ended abruptly, leaving Pierce and his crew in stunned silence. The true nature of the weapon had been revealed, but now they faced a new question. What would humanity do with that kind of power? As the battle continued outside, the crew of Outpost Alpha had no choice but to prepare for the unknown. The Empire might have underestimated them, but humanity now held a secret weapon that could change the entire balance of the galaxy. The stakes had never been higher. The final countdown. The tension on the bridge was palpable. Captain Pierce stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the chaotic battle unfolding in the vastness of space. The Vanguard had taken the lead, but the Empire's forces weren't giving up easily. They fought with a ruthless precision that sent shivers down the crew's spines. However, the Empire hadn't counted on humanity's hidden weapon. "Captain, the Empire is regrouping," Lieutenant Samuels reported, her voice tight with urgency. "They're preparing for one last assault. They'll have their entire fleet aimed directly at us in 15 minutes. Pierce's jaw tightened. They had no time to waste. The Empire wasn't just going to surrender. They were going to throw everything they had at the human fleet to ensure it was wiped out. And with the weapon aboard the Vanguard, the stakes had reached an entirely new level. If that weapon was activated, it could change the entire course of the war, or destroy them all. "Captain, the weapon's countdown is almost complete," Samuels continued, her fingers flying over the console. "It's ready to fire. But I'm detecting something that doesn't make sense. The weapon, it's unstable. If we don't shut it down, it could go off prematurely. We won't just be fighting the Empire, we'll be fighting ourselves." Pierce's heart sank. The weapon, a tool meant to turn the tide in humanity's favor, now posed a grave danger to them all. The Vanguard's power, the weapon's ability to obliterate entire fleets, was a double-edged sword. If it fired without proper control, it could take out both the Empire and anyone within its devastating blast radius. "Can we disable it?" Pierce asked, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "I'm working on it, Captain," Samuel said, her eyes locked on the screens. "But it's not easy. The weapon's systems are locked in place, and its power is too great to simply shut down. We'll need to get to the heart of it, manually override it." "We don't have time for that," Pierce muttered, his mind racing. He couldn't risk the weapon firing. Not like this. The human fleet would be annihilated, and so would the Empire, but at what cost? "Ensign Harris," Pierce called, turning toward the communications officer. "Get a message to Captain Ilara. We need to know everything about the weapon. Now, if she can't disable it remotely, we'll have to do it ourselves." Harris quickly tapped at his console. The bridge was a whirl of activity, the crew doing their best to manage the overwhelming pressure. The seconds felt like hours. As the countdown on the weapon continued, Pierce's thoughts kept circling back to the same question. What was humanity willing to sacrifice to win this war? The power of the weapon could reshape the galaxy, yes, but at what cost? Could they trust themselves to wield that kind of power without becoming what they fought against? A crackling sound cut through his thoughts as the message from Captain Ilara came through. Captain Pierce, listen closely. Ilara's voice came through the comms, calm but urgent. The weapon is designed to destroy anything in its path, but it's not just a weapon. It's a key to unlock something far greater. If we fire it, we will open a door to a new era for humanity. But if it goes off prematurely, it could erase everything. You need to decide. You have only a few minutes. Pierce felt the weight of her words. This wasn't just about surviving the battle. This was about shaping the future of humanity, of the galaxy. Was it worth the risk? Could they trust themselves to control the power within the weapon, or would they become like the very empire they were trying to defeat? Captain, the Empire is preparing to strike, Lieutenant Samuels warned. They've launched another assault wave, this time with everything they've got. If we don't stop them, it'll be over for us. Activate our shields at full power, Pierce commanded. Prepare to repel them. We need to buy ourselves more time. The ship's shields flickered into place, creating a glowing barrier around Outpost Alpha. The Vanguard did the same, the sheer force of their combined shields pushing back the Empire's attack. Energy blasts collided with the barriers, sending shockwaves through the ships. But the defenses held. For now. Captain, Ensign Harris called, his voice trembling with urgency. The weapon's countdown is down to 3 minutes. If we don't act now, it will be too late. Pierce's heart raced. The decision was clear. There was no turning back. He had to act. He had to trust that humanity could control its fate without destroying everything in the process. Lieutenant Samuels, Pierce said, his voice firm. Override the weapon. We'll face the Empire, and we'll fight for the future we want, not one created by a weapon of mass destruction. We're not going to let it control us. Samuels nodded, her fingers flying over the console as she worked to breach the weapon's encrypted systems. The crew held their breath as the final moments of the countdown ticked away. Captain, Samuels said, her voice strained. I've almost got it. Just a few more seconds. The Vanguard fired once more, its weaponry cutting through the Empire's ships with devastating accuracy. The Empire fleet was beginning to crumble, but the battle wasn't over. They needed to finish this. They needed to stop the weapon. With one last keystroke, Samuels hit the final command. The countdown stopped. For a moment, there was silence. The crew on Outpost Alpha and the Vanguard held their breath, waiting for any sign that the weapon had been disabled. Then the screen flickered. The weapon's countdown had halted. We did it, Samuels breathed, her eyes wide with relief. The weapon is offline. We stopped it. Pierce exhaled slowly, a sense of both relief and dread settling over him. The weapon was under control, at least for now. But the Empire was still coming. And there was still much to be done. Prepare for the final strike, Pierce ordered, his voice calm but filled with purpose. We're not done yet. Let's finish this. The crew of Outpost Alpha and the Vanguard steeled themselves for the final moments of the battle. With the weapon under control and the Empire's forces on the run, the future was still uncertain. But humanity had taken a stand, and that was something the galaxy would never forget. The final countdown had just begun, but it was no longer the weapon that counted. It was the fate of the galaxy itself. The battle unfolds. The final moments of the battle approached, and the vast emptiness of space was filled with the deafening roar of weapons fire. Outpost Alpha's shields held strong, but the strain on the ship was immense. The Empire's remaining warships were relentless, pushing forward with all their might. Their fleet had been shattered by the unexpected power of the Vanguard and the human crew, but they still had one last, desperate push to make. Captain, the Empire is closing in, Lieutenant Samuels shouted. They're regrouping for one final assault. We need to hold them off. Pierce's heart raced. The Empire wasn't about to give up easily. They were fighting for their survival, and they had the sheer numbers and firepower to overwhelm the human fleet if given the chance. The Vanguard was weakened from the prolonged battle, its energy reserves running low, and Outpost Alpha wasn't built for direct combat. They had to rely on their skill and cunning to win this final clash. Engage evasive maneuvers, Pierce barked. Take out their lead ships first. Focus fire on their shields. If we can break through, their fleet will fall apart. The crew worked in perfect synchronization, their actions almost instinctive after weeks of training and battling together. Outpost Alpha's weapons fired in rapid succession, hitting the Empire's lead ship with pinpoint accuracy. Each shot was a calculated strike, designed to weaken the enemy's defenses before they could retaliate. Target the rear ships, Pierce ordered. We need to create chaos in their ranks. They won't know where to strike if we keep them on edge. Samuels quickly adjusted the targeting systems, focusing on the enemy ships that had been flanking them. The Vanguard joined in, its powerful energy beams cutting through the Empire's forces with precision. Every shot felt like a victory, and the Empire ships were slowly losing ground. But then, just as victory seemed within reach, a massive shockwave rippled through the battlefield. "Captain, incoming," Ensign Harris shouted, his eyes wide with alarm. "A new Empire battleship has just arrived. This one's even bigger than the rest. It's charging up its main cannon." The enemy had just played their last card. A massive Dreadnought-class battleship, heavily armed and ready to unleash everything it had. The sheer size and firepower of the ship made the other Empire vessels look like small fry in comparison. It was a ship built for one purpose: to crush anything in its path. "We can't take that on directly," Pierce said, his voice tight with concern. "We need to distract it. Focus on the smaller ships first. If we can knock out their support vessels, we might have a shot." But the enemy dreadnought had already begun firing, and its blasts were devastating. The first shot hit one of the smaller ships in the human fleet, obliterating it in a burst of energy. The shockwave sent ripples through the battlefield, and the remaining ships in the human fleet had to scatter to avoid being destroyed. "Steady, everyone," Pierce said, his voice sharp. "We're not done yet. We've taken down bigger foes before. Focus on their weaknesses. Let's make them regret underestimating us." The crew's determination grew stronger with each passing moment. They weren't fighting just for survival anymore. They were fighting for the future of humanity. This battle would decide whether they would rise as a new force in the galaxy or be crushed by the Empire's tyranny. "Captain, I've got an idea," Lieutenant Samuels shouted. "There's a weak point in their hull, right in the center. If we can hit it with the Vanguard's main cannon, we might breach their shield and disable the ship." Pierce's mind raced. The enemy dreadnought was powerful, but every ship had its flaws. This could be their chance to tip the scales in their favor. "Do it," Pierce ordered. "We don't have much time." The Vanguard lined up its shot, and a heavy blast of energy surged from its cannons. The shot struck the enemy dreadnought directly in its exposed weak spot. The impact was catastrophic. The massive ship shuddered as its shields faltered, sparks flying from the impact zone. The Empire dreadnought had been severely damaged. "Yes," Ensign Harris shouted. "The dreadnought's shields are down. We've broken through." "Finish it," Pierce commanded. With their shields down, the Empire dreadnought was now vulnerable. The Vanguard and Outpost Alpha focused all their remaining firepower on the ship, each shot landing with devastating precision. The enemy ship's defenses couldn't hold against the combined onslaught. Within minutes, the dreadnought was no more than a burning hulk, drifting through the battlefield. The remaining Empire ships, now without their heavy-hitting flagship, began to panic. Without the dreadnought's support, the rest of the fleet faltered. The Empire's resolve began to crumble, and one by one, their ships were destroyed or forced to retreat. The human fleet had turned the tide of battle. "Victory is ours," Lieutenant Samuels exclaimed, her voice filled with relief and triumph. Pierce allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The battle had been long and brutal, but the human fleet had proven its strength. They had faced impossible odds, and yet they had emerged victorious. The Empire had been dealt a blow it would not soon recover from. But even as the battle ended, Pierce knew this was only the beginning. The Empire would not forget this day, and they would come for them again. The galaxy was vast, and there were many battles still to fight. "Prepare for what comes next," Pierce said, his voice steady. "We've won this round, but the war is far from over." As the human fleet regrouped, the stars beyond seemed just a little bit brighter. Humanity had shown that they could stand against the might of the Empire and emerge victorious. But the fight for freedom was far from over. The future of the galaxy rested in their hands, and they were ready for whatever came next. Victory and beyond. The battle was over. The once mighty Empire fleet lay in ruins, scattered across the dark void of space like broken pieces of a shattered empire. The Vanguard and Outpost Alpha stood victorious, their crews battered but unbowed. Humanity had fought the most difficult battle of their existence, and they had emerged triumphant. But as the fires of battle faded, the realization began to sink in. This victory, though sweet, was only a small part of the larger conflict ahead. Captain Pierce stood on the bridge of Outpost Alpha, his eyes fixed on the flickering star maps. The Empire's fleet had been crushed, but their forces were vast, and this single battle was unlikely to end their aggression. The galaxy was still divided, still in turmoil, and peace was a far-off dream. "Captain," Lieutenant Samuel said, her voice breaking the silence, "we've analyzed the data from the battle. The Empire's retreating forces are regrouping, but we've dealt them a significant blow. They'll need time to rebuild, to recover. We've bought the galaxy some breathing room." Pierce nodded slowly, his thoughts heavy. "But for how long? They'll return with more ships, more firepower. This is only one battle in a much larger war. We need to be ready." "Captain, we've received word from command," Ensign Harris reported, his voice a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "They've analyzed our victory and the use of the weapon. There's something else we need to discuss. The weapon, the one aboard the Vanguard. It wasn't just a tool for destruction. It was a message, a signal. A signal," Pierce repeated, turning to Harris with a furrowed brow. Harris nodded. "Yes, sir. The weapon's energy signature. It's unlike anything we've ever encountered. It's been broadcasting to unknown regions of space ever since it was activated. Our best guess is that it's sending a signal to some other force, one we've never encountered before, something far beyond the Empire." A cold shiver ran down Pierce's spine. The implications were staggering. The Empire was brutal, but if something even more powerful had been alerted by the weapon's activation, humanity might have just opened a door to an entirely new kind of war, one they were unprepared for. "What kind of force are we talking about?" Pierce asked, his voice grim. "We don't know yet, Captain," Samuels replied. "The signal is too far out to pinpoint exactly, but our analysts think it could be an ancient civilization, one that was wiped out long ago. Or it could be something far more dangerous than the Empire." Pierce stood motionless, his mind racing. They had just defeated the Empire, but now the stakes were higher than ever. They had set off a chain of events that could lead to an even greater threat. Humanity had proved itself resilient, but would it be enough to face what was coming? "Captain," Lieutenant Samuels continued, "we've also received new orders. Command wants us to move forward, set course for the Outer Rim. They need us to investigate the signal source. We're not alone in this galaxy, Captain. And the more we know, the better we can prepare." Pierce's thoughts swirled. They had won a monumental victory, but now they were on the brink of something far larger than they had ever imagined. The battle with the Empire had been fierce, but the real test might lie beyond. Humanity had proven it could stand its ground, but would it be enough against whatever the galaxy had in store? "Prepare the fleet," Pierce ordered, his voice carrying the weight of the decision. "We're heading to the Outer Rim. We've faced the Empire, and now we face the unknown. The future of humanity is out there, and it's time we met it head-on. As the crew sprang into action, the ship began its journey toward the uncharted regions of space. The Vanguard followed closely behind, its powerful engines cutting through the vast expanse. The victory over the Empire would be remembered in the annals of history, but the galaxy was a big place, and humanity's story was just beginning. The stars outside Outpost Alpha seemed to stretch on forever, endless and full of possibilities. For the first time in a long time, Captain Pierce felt a flicker of hope. Humanity had faced the darkness and come out on top. They had stood strong against the odds. And now, with the unknown ahead of them, they would face whatever came next, together. As the fleet moved forward, the crew remained focused, united by the knowledge that their journey was far from over. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers, mysteries, and opportunities, and humanity, for the first time in centuries, had the chance to shape its own future. The final battle had been won, but the war for the galaxy was just beginning. The fate of humanity would depend on how they faced the challenges ahead and whether they could rise above the coming storm. The stars beckoned, and humanity would answer.